Let's wrap things up. Let's get back to the meatpacking district, though. This one in Cincinnati, AEW Dynamite, live in Cincinnati.
Boy, and I'll tell you what, because, we've got a busy couple of days here, and we were trying to get this recorded, and I've got the TV crews are coming back to the castle this week. We got all kinds of stuff going on. I said, I'm going to watch, because I had work to do and getting everything ready for the Feather Bottoms. I'm going to watch AEW as it happens for once. Instead of waiting till the next day and zipping through it, I'm going to watch it right along with everybody else. Boy, did I pick the wrong week to quit sniffing glue. And we're going to talk about what everybody's talking about, obviously, when we get to the end of the program, because that's the meat of the matter. But we're meat packing today all over the place. But let's start out briefly going through the rest of the program, because there was one amazing performance that you could put in a time capsule. And this might have been, I hate to spoil anything for anybody, but this might have been the week that they were lucky that the news from the main event overshadowed everything else about this program. Because boy, howdy, I thought they were ribbing us by 45 minutes in. So they started off with the World Trios title on the line. They've got over 1 million people watching this program coming off of the Big Bang.
No,
and they decide.
No.
No?
This is Tuesday. They're coming off the Major League Baseball playoff game between the Yankees and the Guardians.
So how many people watched that son of a bitch?
Oh, I don't have the ratings in front of me, but that was a high-profile game. It was a do-or-die game for both teams.
Probably more than the Big Bang reruns that they normally have.
Certainly, although there was a gap in between the end of the game and AEW where there was a post-game show. So if you want to listen to Jimmy Rollins for a while, you may have watched that, or you may have turned the channel. I don't know.
He was in Black Flag, right? Jimmy Rollins?
Jimmy Rollins? You're thinking of Henry Rollins. Jimmy Rollins is on the Philadelphia Phillies. Henry Rollins was in Black Flag.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Henry Rollins, one of many former Black Flag members, wondering where all the money is.
Well, anyways.
SST Records. Well, go ahead, please.
Wondering where all the talent is, they decided however many people was watching this program at the start, it would be a good idea if the first thing they saw was Pockets, Trent, and Muffin Top Taylor. And here they come to the ring, and followed by their opponents, Pac, Penthouse, and Felix. So, good Lord, let's see if anybody had the patience to sit through that and see if there was going to be anything good on the program when the ratings do come out. But we will try to update. I don't think we're going to have them this early, but we'll try to update everybody this week on the experience. But anyway, that was the first 15 minutes of the show. Taylor is fatter than ever. He's wearing a top now, so at least the muffin top doesn't protrude as much as it did. And even on fast forward, I could see that at one point they actually built a cheerleading pyramid in the middle of the ring with human bodies. So first 15 minutes of the show, that anybody in that company thought that this was a good way to open up the program if you've got a Major League Baseball lead in, you're a fucking lunatic. It's tragic. So then they did a package on, did I miss anything, by the way, or do you even care to refer to this assault on our senses?
I clearly don't have the venom that you have towards all the participants here, but even with that said, I'm not a fan of this. How many times we have to see Pac and Orange Cassidy in a match? It's over and over and over again. No one wants to see the best friends except the most diehard of AEW fans. Like you said, the most important thing, I'm not going to just rip on it because I didn't pay that close of attention to it because I don't want to see these people anymore. I'm burned out on them. And I didn't like best friends to begin with. But there had to be a better way to begin this show on a special night coming out of a Major League Baseball playoff game. It had to be a better way.
It looks like they just, even if Pac physically standing there, if you didn't know who he was, never seen him wrestle, he looks like $1 million. Penthouse and Felix, at least, well, they've got intriguing outfits on. But the other three look like they just wandered to any local fucking indie show and just grabbed three guys off the card and said, here, go out on national TV. It's embarrassing.
They came out of an NBA playoff game once with Jericho, and the NBA fans went crazy because that was when Jericho was completely out of shape.
Yeah, remember NBA Twitter was what they call it. NBA Twitter's all over Chris Jericho was the news.
Chris Jericho's in the best shape he's been in many, many, many years right now. They should have began the show with him.
They could have begun the show with anything that looked like an athlete, but I wonder if there's baseball Twitter. Is baseball Twitter going to say, what the fuck kind of wrestling is that?
I think baseball Twitter is mostly diehard fans attacking baseball writers, from what I've seen.
Well, anyway, moving on, they did a package on Moxley and Page's main event later on that night. Moxley has personality. Listening to Adam Page talk is like eating dry coleslaw. It's like it's there. All right. The next match, and I'm not kidding anybody, was for the interim women's title with Toni Storm defending against Hikaru Shida. She's still there. And I wrote, are they ribbing us? Storm looks great. Her work is okay. We've been watching her since NXT. She's always looked like a star. You can't really tell a lot about any girl that's fairly good here because the other girls drag them down. She's one of 3 or 4 women with championship belts in the company. Sheeta's been here way too long. And it went forever, and they tried to be real complicated. And then finally, Toni Storm won. And as soon as Toni Storm wins, here comes Jamie Hayter and Reba from the back into the ring to attack her. And Britt Baker's music plays, and she's making a music entrance while they're beating up Toni Storm. Her stooges are beating up Toni Storm in the ring. And then as soon as she gets there, she doesn't even get in the ring yet, and they play Saraya's music. And here comes Saraya. And while Saraya and Britt Baker, again, is this the only person they trust to touch Saraya? They're treating her like a Fabergé egg.
Well, look at it the other way. Is this the only person who wants to work with Saraya and risk injuring her or her being injured doing something simple?
Well, there's no risk here that I've seen so far because they grabbed each other and had a sloppy hockey fight where they were again throwing the punches within the vicinity of each other. While meanwhile, Reba's in the ring beating on Toni Storm with a crutch. And the other girls are, and Baker and Saraya fight off into the crowd. But Toni Storm is still getting the shit kicked out of her. And then here comes the music for Riho. She's back.
To save the division.
Here comes this buck-toothed 87-pound girl in a frilly pink frock with that constant quizzical look on her face like she's confused at seeing colors. And she runs in the ring, drop kicks Reba, comes off the top rope with a crossbody to the floor on Hayter and looked like it killed her, and makes this giant comeback from this 10-year-old girl, at least 10-year-old size girl, that upstaged the biggest female name that they have ever signed. Saraya comes out, gets in a shitty fight with Britt Baker and disappears, and Riho comes in and clears the fucking ring. Can you explain that to me? And then after they did all this, the babyfaces just walked off and left the heels laying there looking at them.
Well, listen, the women's division has been a disaster and a booking mess for a very long time, especially bad the last several weeks as the ratings have died almost every single women's segment on the show. If you want a sign that Omega may be coming back, Shida and Riho reappear on the show this week. You know, Riho, I don't have the problem with Riho that you do. She's grown on me. I look at the days of Riho and Emi Sakura like the glory days now of this women's division. And I like the fact that she no longer dresses like a schoolgirl going to school. Now she's a schoolgirl going to a birthday party at Motion Potion or something. But Saraya debuted, did a promo that never went anywhere. And then she has just come out with music, gotten a pop, and now she's done a couple things with Britt Baker. It's been like a month now. Is this all it is? Just her running out for a pop and fighting with the one person on the roster who will work with her?
But the point is, nobody even remembers she was there by the time the way they constructed this little mousy, bland shopkeeper comes in and just lays waste to everybody and does all this shit that she shouldn't be allowed to do, even if it's possible for her to do it. And where'd Saraya go? Oh, she fought off.
And meanwhile, Jamie Hayter lost in the shuffle and all this. You said it looked like she got killed on the floor. I'm going to guess maybe she didn't, because she's actually really good at taking those bumps where someone does a crossbody, she jumps.
Yeah, but they were on the floor. Here's the thing. Riho is minuscule, microscopic. She has trouble picking up an amoeba. But literally, she does weigh 85, 90 pounds. Take an 85 or 90 pound sack of fucking grass seed, horse feed, potatoes, and go up about 8 feet and pitch it to somebody and see how it feels them when they fucking catch it.
Well, my point was going to be Jamie Hayter, as we pointed out, and then the fans really got into her. She's been getting big pops. The fans have been chanting for her. So she's just lost in the shuffle in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't stand out. It seems like now they realize what a disaster the women's division is. So it becomes whatever match we have, let's just get every woman in this segment. Just everyone run out there, except whoever's working with Jade. Everyone else just run out there and do something, and then vanish for the rest of the show.
Good Lord. And hey, there's a clip floating around on Twitter of, what was her name? Ember Moon? Old Satchel Ass, whatever her name is now.
Now, before I say anything, I saw this. Are we positive? Well, I mean, you can't work things that clearly you're laying in there, but I don't know, before we lambast her, are we sure they weren't working together on this thing?
Well, no, if she was working together, big shit, it was reckless. It was reckless. She was picking people up, or picking this girl up and throwing her. She was fucking all over, just throwing fucking spuds from everywhere that you couldn't, that there was no working involved in this. It was reckless and dangerous.
What'd you think of the spot where she picked her up for a suplex and dumped her onto the floor?
That's what I'm saying. And this girl is a job girl, wanting to get a job, wanting to get booked, so I'm sure she'd say, yes, do this to me, or yes, I'll take this, or whatever. That doesn't mean you just need to grab people and willy-nilly fucking chuck them places. And or remember, this is the one that just tried to do that fucking fall away slam and fell backwards and landed on Britt Baker. What did Britt Baker's face? Broke her nose?
Yeah.
And we've talked about some of the other shit she was doing. What the fuck? She's landing that big wide ass on everybody full force. I don't know what her fucking deal is. But I made the comment on Twitter that if she'd have done that to the wrong girl in one era, she'd have been snatched bald-headed and have her tongue stuck up her own ass. Judy Martin or Sherry Martel wanted to try to do that shit with them. What the fuck? And what in the world on a YouTube show or a dark match or whatever this thing was shot for, would you even want to do something like that to some fucking girl, even if she was willing? Is the Mulkey principle, but the Mulkeys knew how to take the bumps, and they only took them from people they trusted like Bob Eaton to give them to them. And Randy Mulkey has still had multiple surgeries and replaced body parts. And here's some girl's been in business 15 minutes and is getting chucked around and landed on and fucking swung at wildly by this fucking goof. Fuck all of them then. If she was in on it, they're both stupid. I'd have fired both of them. One for doing it and one for letting it happen.
What's the agent's job there?
I don't know what the agent's job there is. Apparently, a lot of eye closing. Anyway, let's go back to the program. they've actually got new talent that somebody might want to see if they do it right. Wink, wink. We'll see about that. Mike Bennett, Matt Taven, and Maria. They apparently debuted on some show that either YouTube or Rampage or whatever, and now they are being placed into a program apparently with Wardlow and Samoa Joe, because they did a pre-taped interview with Wardlow and Joe, and Wardlow was blah because he can't talk, especially in canned promos when they're just standing there giving him bullshit to say. Joe was great. I think his closing line was, "Of the 6 million ways there are for you to die, you've picked the wrong one." He's fucking fantastic. Wardlow needs to be heard from very little and seen smashing people over very much, or smashing over people. But Matt Taven and Mike Bennett they are athletes. They're grown adults. They look good. They've had experience together as a team. I've been high on Mike Bennett since he came to Ring of Honor in 2010. Great all-around guy, worker, athlete. Matt Taven, I thought, what was that period of time? Right as I was leaving Ring of Honor, we were trying to get him in. And then he had an injury, and I think eventually he made his way there. I can't remember. I don't have all the notes on his career. But point being, they can do something with these guys. And Maria looks great, and again has a touch. She's probably got more experience in the ring than any of these other girls at this point. But a package like that you can do something with. They are short on people with major league looks on this program. If they had more, they wouldn't have to send fucking Pockets and the Chuckle Fucks out to open their national TV show. So they look great. And I got to hand it to Maria. I mean, when we got her in OVW in 2005, she didn't know shit from apple butter and didn't know anything about wrestling. I'm like, oh, because I'm rolling my eyes at all these, lingerie models that Laurinaitis had been sending me. But she stuck with it and learned. She's a smart girl. She's intelligent. So she stuck with it and learned her shit and has done well and ended up being able to talk, which I didn't think would happen at the start. So anyway, we got to see them about 30 seconds on tape after we'd watched Tony Storm and all the rest of that shit for about 20 minutes. We were 40 minutes into the program at this point, ladies and gentlemen. And then Renee Moxley Good did a backstage promo. Now she's Bar Brady in the heyday. She's in every segment. They do it. If either Bar Brady was doing every interview or Tony did every interview, now Renee's going to do every interview. But backstage with FTR, you could hear the people in the arena popping. They're like, do we get to see him tonight? No, you don't. But in the back, Swerve and Keith Lee was actually there, and they popped in, and FTR challenged them next week for a #1 contender match. So I'll believe they have a good idea here for FTR when I see it. But again, we're 40 minutes into the show. We had the fucking 6-man fiasco. We had the Rotten Girls match. There's the best tag team in wrestling in a pre-taped backstage promo. And for that matter, there's Mike Bennett and Matt Taven, an experienced tag team, athletic, competent, and they're being used to put Wardlow and Samoa Joe over, who are two individual great talents and have no business in the world being a tag team. Your thoughts, Brian?
I'm against right now Maria and Matt Taven and Bennett just because I've said recently they're jamming Ring of Honor stuff onto this show out of nowhere, and it's not helping the show. And it's not helping AEW.
Wait a minute. They wrestled in Ring of Honor before, but they certainly to God, if they bring them in, they're not just going to, they can only be in Ring of Honor. They're coming to AEW, right? I'm talking about, I want to see these guys in AEW.
I'm saying I think it's going to be for the next Ring of Honor pay-per-view, but we'll see what happens. With FTR, you know what I didn't like, and I've said it before, I'm a big fan of Swerve, and I like Keith Lee as a heel with Swerve, because they're so different. But they did a little thing that drives me crazy. Renee Paquette introduces FTR, and then they walk from the side like they weren't there, and the camera just shows them for a second without anyone saying anything. That WWE thing they do. I hate that. And it's so wrong and unnecessary. And there's no reason to do that. Whoever said that they should do that, they shouldn't do that. It looks like WWE, and that's not it's not one of the things in WWE you should copy.
I agree. I concur. But let's talk about something else they shouldn't copy. Any more fake fights in the back. So meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, remember we saw 15 minutes of Pockets and the Chuckle Fucks. We see FTR for 30 seconds on a backstage promo. Now here's Jay Lethal. And what's he doing? He's in the back of the arena with Sanjay Dutt and Darby Allin and Officer Barbrady. And apparently they gave him 1 minute for this whole thing because Jay Lethal rushes through a challenge. And Sanjay Dutt says he knows Darby's weakness. And then they get in a fake fight and they knock Darby down. And we've gone over the physics of the garage doors in the back of these arenas. And they did it again. They put Darby under the garage door and closed it on him. Like he would be stuck under it. Like that these things are the sword of Damocles or out of an Edgar Allan Poe novel. And even when they encounter resistance, there's no such thing as a safety feature, and the door will continue pushing down on you until it cuts you in half. And then while he's stuck under the goddamn door, supposedly, Jay puts a figure 4 on him while he's stuck under the door. Help me, Brian.
I was happy.
Did this look preposterous?
Well, I actually thought before everything happened, Jay Lethal was the best we've seen of Jay Lethal because he seemed natural, seemed like someone you're intrigued by. Sanjay drags him down.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sanjay just does it. Comes across like a minor league manager.
Well, that's the thing. Sanjay's doing the same thing they did with that Robert Stone in NXT and that Mark Sterling. He's doing comedic manager mannerism parodies.
He's doing Mark Sterling. He's doing Chavo when he managed Andrade. Like, just the stuff that doesn't fit and doesn't really work well. Jay Lethal on his own or Jay Lethal with someone else other than Sanjay may be all right, but Sanjay's dragging Lethal down. As far as the door thing, of course I thought of you right away in that Nick Jackson Jericho angle way back. You said everything I think about it. I guess I'll ask one other question. The FTR promo with Swerve and Keith Lee, that was taped with Renee Young. We didn't see Renee Young in front of the crowd. This was also in the back. Do you think Tony's learned that he's not flying everyone in every week and now he's taping stuff 2 weeks in advance?
No, I think everybody's still there. I think he's just putting all the people that you would want to see in the back to hide them and putting all of his friends out in the ring so they can stink the joint out. Because I guess you could have taped all that stuff last week, but my God, then I've never seen anybody book anything like in this fashion. To just do all this fucking chaos. How do you know last week to do a backstage fucking fight and a garage door thing when you don't know what's... All right, never mind. Let's get to the good stuff. And it ain't going to take long because we're there. Tony Schiavone was in the ring with William Regal. And before Regal had a chance to speak, MJF's music plays. And here comes him, and you can tell that he knew that he had a long story to tell because he didn't waste any time. He got to the ring. Soon as he was in the ring, the music cut off. Tony Schiavone vanished again. Why do they have him in the ring? But here comes MJF. And he told the story, and I'm not going to try to tell the story or give any of the high points. This was one of the most amazing verbal performances I've ever seen. But the story of how Regal treated him when he was 19, and some people are going to go absolutely apeshit that they said, oh, he got a job as a WWE job guy. And he said it on AEW. Well, it's a true story. And this is what's registering with people, because it's not wink, wink. Oh, this is a shoot because I'm calling you by your real name. He's telling a real story that happened to him. I've never heard this story before, but it certainly sounds plausible. It sounds believable. Maybe he branched off a little bit. Maybe Regal didn't tell him off as bad as he said he did at the end, but where does the work begin and end? We don't know. But much of this stuff happened, and he delivered the story in a way that not only made it clear, but made you listen to him and gave a reason for his motivation. This might have even been a supervillain origin story. Instead of gamma rays or a radioactive spider bite, he got pissed off by and disrespected by William Regal. And it made him want to get better to prove to everybody, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, I don't know where this is going, where they're trying to want this to go with MJF. Because he's saying things that are ever more sympathetic to a person, and they're liking him anyway. But at the same time, my feeling is, and I'll say this publicly, if MJF was to switch babyface to where he starts selling like Ricky Morton and starts being nice to anyone, or being polite to anyone, or being respectful to anyone, it takes away what makes MJF special. They're going to cheer for him because he's far and away so much more talented and fresher and newer and different than everybody else in that fucking company and everybody else in this business, that people are going to love him. But they love the devil. They don't love the reformed devil. So the best thing he can do, and the best thing they can do with him, because they got a winner here, is just realize that he needs to be, with the provocation and the origin story and the details that he's fleshing out, he still needs to be the devil. It's just those fans are going to learn to love them some devil. If he becomes a nice guy,
well, no,
you're taking it away from him.
He has to stay who he is, no matter what, whether he's a heel or a babyface or whatever you want to call him.
So, but what a performance! And he even said, "I would have killed myself, but I wouldn't give you the satisfaction, Regal." And then, and honestly, here's the thing: after telling that story, he turned around and switched heel again at the end of the thing. By the time he quit speaking, he was right back as a heel. But when he threw the microphone down, the crowd gave him, it wasn't a standing ovation, but it was an ovation for the verbal performance that he just gave. It was amazing. They even recognized, regardless of whether we agreed or disagreed with what he said or whatever the fuck, that was one of the goddamn most, and especially these people have sat through an hour of this horse shit at that point. But my God. And then as soon as Regal starts talking, the people are starting to boo him because he's been made to look bad by MJF. But Regal, remember when he debuted and he even apologized afterwards? He was rusty. It went nowhere. This was Regal. On any other night with anybody in the ring but MJF, this William Regal's would have been the best promo of the week or the best performance or whatever. Because he reminded MJF that he was 16 when he went to the carnivals. and had grown men kicking his ass. And this is true, and everybody knows it's been in his book. And that lit the fire under his ass. And so he lit a fire under MJF's ass. And he chastised him for assaulting Tony Schiavone, but he said he knew that MJF always had it, but he let Regal down because he hasn't proven anything. He's hired people to do his dirty work. And he turned his back on MJF and offered him the shot, and that's where MJF wouldn't do it. And Regal told him he's still got a lot to prove, and for once, somebody walks off on MJF and leaves him thinking about it. I want to see, as if I had confidence as a professional and as a fan of his, if I had confidence that at some point they're not going to fuck MJF up with this bad booking or Tony's stupid ideas or Jericho's advice or somebody getting in the way of this guy, I would love this without reservation because I don't know where it's going. I want to see the next installment. I want to hear them interact again. I want to know what MJF is going to do. It's perfect. If there was a Bill Watts, Eddie Graham, Dusty Rhodes, somebody in charge that you would trust with a generational talent's career in their hands, then I would be all over this. But I'm just trepidatious because if it's just MJF doing things, I'm fine. But if Tony or any of his stooges and suck-ups start meddling in this, I'm afraid for what might happen. But otherwise, fucking brilliant. Wait a minute. Both Regal and MJF.
Yeah, you said it was a great performance from MJF. You know, like, I guess a lot of great performances in wrestling. I think there was a lot of truth in what he said. You know, where they're going from here on is obviously something that they're going to work on. But it sounded like there was a lot of real shit in this. And that's, of course, what makes wrestling angles work and what makes people care. They're teasing a lot of different things, whether it's MJF outright being a babyface, whether it's Regal turning with MJF, whether it's MJF not breaking the rules, MJF turning against the firm. I mean, they've teased a lot of different things, and no one knows what's going on. MJF's the one guy, other than the Jericho feud, which we all knew how it was going to end, unfortunately, you can never predict what's going to happen. And whatever's going on with him and Moxley over the AEW title, they announced the title match later on in the show coming up. You have all this drama now with him and Regal. It's an intriguing time, and he's the one guy whose segment delivers each and every week on this show. Like you said, and I think because of what he went through, I have to imagine this guy knows as well as everyone else what that 1 year long Jericho feud was. And although he's not doing anything with Jericho, as we've talked about here on the show, and as we announced earlier in the show with this press release, Jericho has a more hands-on role with AEW right now than ever before. His friends are agents. He's very, very close with Mega. He has Tony's ear. And a lot of his ideas are getting on TV more than ever before. The Young Bucks aren't there to counter-program Jericho. CM Punk's not there to counter-program Jericho. Of course, Cody is long gone. I think MJF is hopefully in a position where Tony Khan realizes this is the number one star in my company, and he certainly will be going forward unless we fuck it up. He's not going to let Jericho or anyone else near whatever he does. I have to think he knows that if he's going to do this, he has to do it right himself.
Oh, well, we shall see.
Because Jericho's the one. See, that's the thing. I feel like, you know, I remember years ago at the Eddie Gilbert Memorial Brawl, there was the nice moment where everyone was in the ring, and all of a sudden there was a chant in the whole building of Eddie. You know, it was very nice. His family's in the ring and they're chanting Eddie. What always bothered me was I saw who started it. I saw that it was Don Leibel, the photographer who's friends with Eddie at ringside, started it and looked around to get people going. It felt predetermined. And I feel like when Jericho put out there and insisted on it and trying to show what a genius he is at that press scrum, that MJF needs to be a babyface, it kind of poisoned everything. Because once that was put out there from Jericho with Tony Khan sitting next to him, insisting on it, that's the only thing I worry about. This wasn't as natural as it should have been because it's been forced by comments and by certain people.
Well, because you've got a fucking, egotistical canned ham sitting there wanting to give his viewpoints on everything instead of letting things happen. Can you imagine if Vince McMahon had been out at a press scrum and when Austin first started getting popular, but was still a heel going, yeah, we're going to switch Steve babyface sooner or later. You people are just loving him. No, he let it fucking happen. He didn't tell them how to react when they were already reacting a way that was beneficial to him.
But again, with all that said, I'm intrigued by MJF and Regal. I'm intrigued where this is going. As much as I like MJF's matches, I'm not looking forward to MJF versus Moxley because I know it'll be Moxley's match more than it'll be MJF's match. I just know it. But we'll see where they go. I have faith in MJF. Since the Jericho feud, MJF has a really high batting average. Next to CM Punk, probably the highest batting average in AEW. So I have faith in whatever's going on. I have a little bit of faith.
Well, one of the next segments was an example of how to completely neuter and neutralize the hottest guy in the company. Because Renee was sitting down with Bryan Danielson and Wheeler Useless. And yeah, as I said before, I'm not getting the sense that Renee is the second coming of Barbara Walters, this incisive, female reporter, but she's better than Officer Barbrady. However, this was Bryan Danielson, who, remember, it's less than a year still ago that he was the highlight of the program. We couldn't wait to hear the promos, the fucking matches. Now he's sitting there spinning this whole promo, putting Daniel Garcia over, and sounded like he was thrilled about it. And then Wheeler Useless basically tells Bryan Danielson off. You should have seen it coming a mile away, this thing with Garcia. I knew he was a snake. You fell for it. And he tells Bryan Danielson off and walks off from him like now Danielson is Wheeler's fucking flunky. Jesus H. Christ. And that was the most blah segment that Bryan Danielson has been in since they have figured out a way to make Danielson boring and immaterial.
Well, a few things here. One, the less Yuta talks, the better. If you want him to get over, he has like that Seth Rollins screech a little bit. Not a good talker. Certainly not now. Danielson sat there, and I feel like in a lot of ways this was a microcosm of his entire AEW run. He just sat there and let things happen. And that's that. Does Danielson exert himself? Does Danielson have ideas of his own? Is he happy with the way he's being booked? Is he just content? He's just happy to have a job and he can have his matches and he doesn't care about how he's booked? Because none of this makes any sense. He means so much less today than he meant a year ago. And when he came in a year ago, we were talking about, oh my God, the biggest gate they could do would be Danielson versus Punk. This would be the biggest house. If they did that match today, if Punk came back today to wrestle against Danielson, it wouldn't mean as much. Not because of Punk, but because of the way Danielson's been used. He's lost to Jericho a bunch of times.
And not because of Danielson, because of the way Danielson's been used. He's still that talent, but now they've rendered it meaningless.
Yeah, but even his matches, to me, like I said before, they've gotten less creative than ever before. The other problem is, talent be damned. And actually, I think Garcia is a lot more talented than Yuta. But Tony, fucking Jericho, even Moxley, they are insistent on building towards Yuta and Garcia like this matters to anyone right now. They have forced these guys into spots and into being involved with other main event wrestlers. They've forced them into these spots when there were other people the fans chose and were ready to go. And this is the problem when you have too many people, you have too many cooks. Everyone has their person that they want to use, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not saying Yuta couldn't be something eventually. Garcia, I think, has much more potential than Yuta. But still, the way he's been used and how he's been used and how he's being forced onto that show, that's the problem. Yuta and Garcia have been picked by these guys, by Tony and his friends, and they're not giving up on this, whether or not it's good TV or not.
Well, speaking of not giving up, Chris Jericho is apparently his, meaning of life now. His mission is to destroy all of the legacy and respect that Ring of Honor had, right? He's going to be the sports entertainer. It's going to tear up Ring of Honor, the company that no longer exists. And the guy that's trying to uphold the honor of Ring of Honor is former Ring of Honor champion Dalton Castle. I was gone a few years before Dalton Castle came into Ring of Honor. I don't remember I've ever met him. I don't know that I've ever seen him have a long match. I think I've seen some clips. I thought he was, at one point I saw him do some great German suplex shit. He's a very strong young man, but I've never seen the gimmick in full bloom. And now I have. And, this is like Adrian Street. Adrian Street came along and in the 80s when he came over from England and stood out. It was completely different from everything. Nobody was doing, at least in the territories that Adrian was in, was doing anything remotely flamboyant like that. So if Dalton Castle was in a situation like that where he was the only one, I might buy this. But since every goddamn thing on this show and every goddamn thing on every other show looks so fucking visually ridiculous and silly and hokey and fake and blah, blah, this didn't stand out. This just added to the fucking stink of the carnival fucking livestock car. So the guy trying to uphold the honor of Ring of Honor when Jericho went for the Code of Honor at the beginning of the match, Dalton Castle puts his hand down the front of his tights, plays with his crotch, and then pulls out a fucking finger for Jericho for the Code of Honor. He's the one upholding the honor of Ring of Honor. Ian Riccaboni was on color. He should be the host of every program Tony has. But Sockface is a friend. And Dalton Castle came out with 9 of what they call the boys. They're all dressed in Mardi Gras masks and what did I say about Sonny Kiss at one time? Made everybody upset. He looked like he got off his day show as a drag queen at the Tropicana. Well, they look like they're in the chorus line of I don't know what. I don't know where they even got these costumes. But at one point, Jake Hager gets up on the apron of the ring, and Dalton Castle nails him off to the floor, and then one of the boys jumps in the ring. This is during the match. One of the boys jumps in the ring, and he grabs the boy and throws him out of the ring through the ropes onto Hager. Then another one, and then a third one. That was the break spot. And I determined at that point that I would not be returning after the break. I skipped ahead and Jericho retained.
You didn't see them brawling on the floor, throwing punches at Jake Hager?
No, I did not.
You have to go back and see that. Jake Hager, you want to talk about the power of Chris Jericho. Jake Hager, who's been there since the beginning, getting a very nice contract, has meant nothing to anyone there. Jake Hager is on the floor with his purple hat, and the boys surround him and start punching in his direction. A few of them looked like they were almost punching him, but a few of them were just punching air. And the camera was right there, right on top of it.
Well, somehow, after Jericho retained, Jericho and all of his minions ended up on the stage, and Jerry Lynn was chastising them. He's an agent there, so Jericho picks up Jerry Lynn and gave him a tombstone pile driver on the stage like he was my Aunt Lola. In the words of Dusty Rhodes, don't do shit you don't know how to do. If you can't do the move, don't do the move. He thought it'd be a great idea to tombstone Jerry Lynn on the entrance stage and then realized that he was going to kill him because he couldn't do it. So he bent his knees and did like a squat and then kind of sat down forward a little bit. I mean, I've gotten out of bed harder. And I'm not suggesting, because I love Jerry Lynn, known him since the fucking late 80s. I'm not suggesting he should have hurt him. I'm suggesting he shouldn't have done the fucking move. What'd you think of it? Was it dangerous from your perspective?
I mean, it was the safest tombstone pile driver I've ever seen in my life. It was unnecessary. I mean, let me ask you this. Everyone knows what I think. I don't have to say it. If you're booking something where you have a guy who wins a championship and he's going to show his superiority over the past, I mean, if you're watching this and the booking's not obvious, I don't know what is. I mean, Jericho's just going to steamroll over every champion. And what are you watching for if you know the result of the match? Because you know what's going to happen. I mean, it's not going to be like all of a sudden, oh, this week Jericho surprisingly lost to Austin Aries on AEW TV. Former Ring of Honor champion has won it back. He's just going to beat every champion they have there. What do you think of all this stuff with Jericho and Ring of Honor? He went after Riccaboni. He beat up Bobby Cruz. He's going after their champions. Again, Ring of Honor's all over this show. Am I just being too hard on this?
Well, no, a lot of people are saying, well, it's good because, Jericho being the Ring of Honor champion, he's a name people know that could help him get a TV deal. And I've mentioned this before. Bryan Danielson is a name they know, and he ought to be able to help him get a TV deal. If Jericho can, and Danielson's of the same status, and he fits the suit. Danielson wrestled in Ring of Honor before. He has history, and he can do the style. And he can have great matches with others that can make them better that do the style. Jericho, it's a vanity project. It's a championship so he can beat people. And again, they didn't bring in a succession of outstanding independent stars to put their own fucking champions over. But because it's Jericho, oh yeah, Tony, bring somebody different in every week for me to beat. That's the story here. Well, that's kind of what you do to get anybody over. So no, Jericho does not fit at all. And I don't know how that Tony thinks he's going to launch a separate promotion when he can't take care of the one he's got. And then you're going to have a situation where if Taven and Bennett are for Ring of Honor and the Briscoes have been signed to Ring of Honor and Jay Lethal's going to be figured into Ring of Honor.
Colt Cabana.
And blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm talking
Brian
about
Cage.
legit. I'm talking about talent. He's got talent that people would want to see on the AEW program instead of these outlaw fucking darlings that he signed 3 years ago, but he's going to stick them in Ring of Honor. So doesn't make sense. You want to talk about the main event?
The last match left in Cincinnati, Jon Moxley's hometown, the AEW World Champion Jon Moxley versus Hangman Adam Page.
And the one time that you would believe that Moxley could come in from the parking lot, because maybe he just lives down the street, he came in from the locker room area. He was already inside the building, coming down the long hallway, but he still didn't come out the entranceway. He walked into the arena. And of course, it's two baby faces fighting again for the world title in AEW, which always happens because Tony can't keep his baby face and heels straight or get heat on anybody. So, and yes, of course, it's Moxley's hometown, so they're going to boo Page because Page, actually, this is probably the best thing he's ever done as far as getting people to cheer him, because now they'll feel sorry for him, so they won't boo him as much as they would just if he was hanging around. But they seem to go full into Page is going to prove he's a man, like when he punched himself silly last week. So Page jumps the champion in the arena. Even though Page is a babyface too, they can't differentiate between a guy that's going to fight a guy straight up as a man one-on-one and a guy who is just, it's all bullshit and it's all phony. I know the way they present it, but if you're a babyface, why do you want to attack the champion out on the floor and give him a suplex on the concrete floor that nobody in the arena could see because they were over in the corner? And then Paige goes up to the balcony and backflips off of it onto Moxley. Why are you trying to end the guy's career in the goddamn breezeway instead of get him in the ring and beat him for the title if you're a babyface, if you're not a heinous person? They don't know how to work to where it fits the person's personality and still gets the point across. It's either all chaos or all wrestling. There's no gray area in between. So, at that point, as I mentioned to you right before we went on the air, they went to the break after the balcony backflip, and there was 20 minutes left in the show, and I said, I don't want to watch these fucking two. I'm going to go to bed, and I'll check out the rest of this match tomorrow, because already it's Moxley, they're in the crowd, backflip off the balcony, I don't want to see anymore. But then I carry some stuff up to the office, and I get on Twitter because I wanted to check and see if I should retweet anything before I went to bed. And by that point, I see that Adam Page is laying knocked out in the middle of the ring. And I was all right, so I tweeted a few things, and then I went back down to watch basically the rest of the match they had is pretty much what you would think. They came back from the break after the balcony backflip 3 minutes later, and they still weren't in the ring, but Moxley was bleeding. And at that point, it's like a parody of every Moxley match. None of it's in the ring, and he will bleed. And then, as I mentioned, Adam Page, the upright, honest, forthright cowboy from Virginia, mounts Moxley and pummels him on the steel stairs while he's bleeding profusely. And then finally they got in the ring. And they had every indie wrestling fan's dream match. They did their moves to each other back and forth, and Moxley was bleeding. And at one point, Page gave Moxley a ridiculously dangerous dead eye on the ring apron. And believe it or not, that's not what caused the injury, folks. They go to a break again. They come back. Page throws Moxley off the top rope with a sack of shit fall-away slam. Boom, that doesn't cause an injury. And then Page gives Moxley a clothesline, and Moxley, of course, takes a bump and then gets right back up and doesn't sell it. And Page runs at Moxley, and Moxley clotheslines Page. And Page goes over backwards and lands on his head and stays there. And the one thing they can be happy about was it wasn't Rick Knox, the idiot referee. It was Paul Turner. I believe Ring of Honor had those guys trained in spotting concussions and or injuries, but Paul Turner's been in the ring 20 years, and he was right there on top of it. He knew something was wrong, and he stopped it, and they brought the doctor in, Sampson, and the doctor made the official stoppage because Page ain't moving. He knocked himself out. He landed on his head, and there's 10 minutes left in the show, and the match is stopped. And then I saw on Twitter people are trying to, well, is it Moxley's fault, or was it blah, 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 or he couldn't take this bump? Believe me, I'd love to blister one or the other of these guys with being a unprofessional dipshit, but I don't think this was anybody's fault. It was one of those things that happens. Now, having said that, a contributory factor, as you and I, Brian, were talking about earlier, is now everybody, you can't just take a clothesline. You've got to, if somebody clotheslines you, it's got to cut you a backflip. And that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to do the backflip. And instead of going all the way over on his stomach, he landed on his, either the side of his head or his forehead, and then went down. And I mentioned to you, and we were talking about this, when 30 years ago, the first time you saw a son of a bitch take a backflip off a clothesline, you're, holy shit. Well, now there's multiple of them in every match, and they get right back up. So if there was fault to be ascribed to anybody here, it's the fault of the general wrestling population that now we got to get clothesline and take a backflip. And everybody's figured out the best method to do it. And that's what they're doing. And sooner or later, somebody was going to land on their fucking head. Guess what? Happened on live national television. But it wasn't either guy's fault except, goddamn, making shit more complicated than it needs to be. But this was not even the most dangerous thing either one of these guys did in this match. So anyway, they stopped it. And then here was the thing. There was 10 minutes left on the air, and I know they didn't expect this. But they go to the announce desk and with graphics run down the Rampage card. Somebody in the truck said, "Hey, Sockface, just run down the Rampage card." A guy is down being checked by the doctor. Do they do that in football? You watch football. Nobody gets hurt in baseball. It's a pussy sport. But in football,
baseball's the best sport, and people get hurt in baseball too.
Well, people can get hurt in podcasting too if you don't watch your fucking attitude, but don't make me change my tone. But if in a football game, the guy gets wiped out and he's laying there and they're putting him on a stretcher, they're checking him out, the doctors or whatever, do they just instantly say, "Oh, let's plug some upcoming games," or do they stay on the situation at hand?
They talk about what's happening. They can't ignore it. Obviously, there's something happening on the field with someone being taken off. They have to talk about what's happening. It just happened the other day, or a couple weeks ago in Miami, where the quarterback got another concussion on the field, and we watched everything happen on TV.
Well, they shot everything but Page, and that was the story. The player down on the field, it's a dangerous sport. We have doctors checking on him. People are concerned. No, they never shot Page again. They stayed away from it. Like it was goddamn... I know when a mark hits the ring on live TV, you try to stay away from it because that could be a legal situation. Well, who knows? Maybe this is too. They sue everybody else over there. But no, this is a players down on the field. Cover this. This makes wrestling look dangerous because it is. People were concerned about Page. They wanted to know more. But they hid Page. You never saw him again. Moxley cuts a promo. They're tight on him because he's in the ring with Page, but they won't shoot the man down. And then Moxley cuts the promo. I mean, Jade had got chicken shit in earlier without getting bleeped, but there had been and MJF said, "Goddamn," but there was other bleepings on this program. Then Moxley got bleeped with whatever he said, then said shit twice, and then called MJF out. And MJF came out, milked the cash in of the chip, but then made the challenge for Full Gear and said, "For the first time in my life, I'm going to earn it." That made my butthole quiver a little bit. Moxley gets bleeped again for saying something and again for saying something. He's a menace to live television. And they went off the air. But, I mean, you could... I'm not criticizing the way they handled this. They stopped it quickly. The doctor was in there. The thing I'm criticizing is then they just completely ignored the only story going on, that Page was down and hurt and being checked by the doctor. That was not the point to run through the matches on a show that nobody's going to watch anyway.
Your opinion doesn't change about that if the thought at the time wasn't, "Oh, it's a concussion." If the thought was maybe he potentially had some sort of spinal damage or some kind of neck issue, and that would prevent him from maybe... Again, Moxley in the ring said, "I hope he can walk again." That's where a lot of people's minds went.
Well, yeah, and then Moxley, maybe Moxley was trying to make it more dangerous than it actually was because he wanted to make it a big deal. I don't know, but the point is, it's the same thing. Moxley's not a spinal surgeon, and I don't think Doc Sampson is Dr. Jim Andrews in Birmingham, the orthopedic guru. They knew he'd got knocked out. You're not going to diagnose a spinal injury if he's communicating and he was moving his arm, which we saw that. Then there's no reason that you couldn't have a long shot of the ring. I'm not talking about put the camera up his fucking nose and intrude on the conversation he's having with the doctor, but you could report on what's going on.
Should it be covered? Should it be covered like something that's actually happening by those commentators? Taz was the only one
because it was actually happening.
Because Taz was the only one who showed any sort of emotion really at all to what was happening.
Well, because he's been hurt before and he knows how it feels and he knows what's going on. But yes, that was the story. Not give us the full diagnosis, but they took the bottom rope off. They put him on a stretcher. They carried him out. That would be seen in football. How many years ago was it that one of the University of Louisville basketball players broke his leg in a game, and it was so gruesome that when his own teammates and actually the opposing team on the sidelines saw it, you didn't see it on camera. You saw the teammates react to it. Half of the college basketball players jumped up to their feet and jumped backwards over their bench. It was so gruesome. The lower bone snapped, came out through the skin, everything. You never saw that detail on television. You saw the guy go down, and then they shot the court long ways, and they replayed the reaction shots. Once the viewers saw how the ball players viewed the incident, they didn't want to see it. But they were reporting on the guy. We've got the EMTs there. They've called the ambulance. They're not up on the goddamn compound fracture, but people know what's going on because that was the story. It's a live sporting event. These things happen that should have been covered. But all of these people are in show business. They're not in sports. They don't know what would actually happen. They think they're all actors and entertainers.
When a player gets hurt, because it happens in baseball too, Jim. If a player crashes into a wall, a lot of times players crash into each other. Someone doesn't yell, "I got it," or someone doesn't hear the other person yell, "I got it." Swami heard it because he's barking up a storm out there. But usually what happens is you see the injury. Unless it's something really severe, you'll see a few replays of it to try to figure out what's happening, because the commentators are trying to figure out what's happening just like you are at home.
Yeah.
Then maybe you'll see some shots of some fans watching, maybe some people in the dugout watching. If it's bad, they're not going to do close-ups of the player. If he's moving around, you may see him put his hand to his head, and then usually they put him on a cart, take him off the field. You see that, and you get a big ovation from the fans. They address it. They don't just have someone disappear in the middle of the game, and you just have to hope that someone else mentions it ever again.
And I'll say this, I thought of this, and then we'll close up. I've got places to go, people to see, and things to do. But I was trying to remember, in my time as a photographer, and then as a performer, a photographer in the 70s, performer in the 80s, booker and performer in the 90s, I'm trying to remember the first time that I was either saw or was present when somebody got knocked out and couldn't finish a match. And I can't remember it. I saw a guy in the Gardens get his leg broken one night, and obviously he couldn't get up and finish that match, but it was a tag team match, so the partner just it was Luke Graham, and the guy that got his leg broke was John Rogers. Crazy Luke Graham gives the fucking thumb to the throat. The guy falls over, the guy with the broken leg. The guy with the broken leg fucking pins him, and he gets carried out. The famous finish with Inoki and Hulk Hogan, where Hogan hit him with the clothesline. He took the bump off the apron. We still don't know whether that was legitimate or not. There was controversy about that, but it made huge news because something like that never happens. And I've seen guys get their bell rung, especially in tag team matches, but still finish the match because they weren't knocked completely out. Bobby Fulton's done that once. And I'm not saying that it's Moxley's fault or it's Page's fault. I'm saying something's going on, that there's more injuries than ever before, that it's happening more frequently, and that they're worse injuries when they do happen, requiring surgeries and concussion protocols and long times off and all that stuff. And you asked me earlier, they didn't have a concussion protocol back in the 70s and 80s, and that's correct. They didn't. They didn't know that much about it. And guys got their bell rung all the time and went right on, and it did damage. But at the same time, Again, I was at matches 7 nights a week for 15 years. and this shit didn't happen. So something's different. And to me, it boils down to everybody's doing more and taking more chances and hitting harder or getting more complicated or getting more dangerous. And it still doesn't register because people are seeing this stuff. It's like a constant highlight video of car wrecks. You can't look away from the car wreck until it lasts 30 minutes, and then you get bored with it. So now that's what guys are doing. They are flying off of and falling down on and going through and getting hit with more shit than ever before. And because it happens so constantly, it's not registering with the people. They see it and pop, and then next day they're on to something else. But it's accumulating on the wrestlers' bodies. Who could have ever predicted something like that would happen 30 years ago?
You know, the most famous example of it happening on TV is the time it didn't actually happen, but the Shawn Michaels Owen Hart angle.
Yes.
In 95.
And I'm glad you brought that up because somebody's going, well, Cornette, you were in on one. Everybody, and we made, we took as much precaution as we could take to make sure that looked legitimate. But Michaels had the concussion, gotten beaten up in upstate New York, whatever. Everybody knew that was true. And everybody knew he returned from his concussion. And at the proper point, we were in Richmond, Virginia that night. I've never seen a house that small as in Richmond that night for WWF Monday Night Raw. But it was horrible. But Michaels, at some point in the match, all of a sudden, woozy, equilibrium, dizzy, and goes down. And then me and Owen are like, what the fuck? What do we do? What do we do? That was a work. 25 years later, I'll reveal that. But everybody was concerned because you never saw something like that happen. And now, and you still don't see guys actually, knocked out and unable to finish the match. Well, except in AEW, they jumped off the top rope and landed on that guy's head here months ago. That was a dark match, not a TV match. And they just drug him to the side and tagged him out and continued around him. But I'm not saying I'm happy Adam Page landed on his head, even if he is boring and blah and fucked up the whole company by starting the whole snowball rolling with Punk. But that doesn't mean I want to see him break his neck, but guess he's going to try to do it regardless of how I feel about it. But again, you can't do all this shit and get away with it forever. So there you go.
Well, that was AEW Dynamite from Cincinnati, and there you go. And as we're wrapping things up, Jim, you are trending again on Twitter.
What'd I do now?
Apparently a lot of people have a problem. Apparently you're a racist because of your comments about Athena and her stiffness in that match with the other wrestler.
Because Athena's black. Because she's throwing this girl around and fucking beating the shit out of her. If I criticize that because she's black, then that means I'm a racist. What the fuck?
Apparently you using the phrase snatch you bald-headed has gotten people upset.
How is that racist?
I don't know. I'm actually looking it up because it's not a phrase I'm used to.
Mama Cornette used to say that all the time.
Here's an article. Where is this from? The Journal Inquirer. Lastly, an Enfield reader wrote, bet you haven't heard this one. My Swiss German mom used to yell, if you don't stop that, I'm going to snatch you bald-headed.
Yeah, grab you by the hair and it'll come all out.
Those New Englanders I moved among never let me forget it when I first used it. This is an article about slang words from the past, so apparently you using a phrase that other people weren't aware of about a wrestler that other people may like makes you another racist.
Oh, God. All righty. Anyway, don't get snatched bald-headed, folks. Listen to our programs every day, and we'll leave your hair alone. Yeah, Mama Cornette used to say that. She says, I'll snatch you bald-headed if you don't come over here, whatever the case.
The worst is still Tracy Smothers. I'll beat your, what did it say? I'll beat your dick stiff. Whatever he used to say.
No, I'll knock your dick stiff.
I'll knock your dick stiff. That was the fucking.
Well, you know, actually, and maybe Adam Page can comment on this. Sometimes when you get fucking knocked out, it makes your dick stiff. That's where that fucking phrase came up.
All right. Well, the things you learn on the Jim Cornette, this is not the experience. On Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru, which we are finishing up, we will have a song next week